All right, let's get this show on the road. Okay, so today I have to make my auction piece for repair days. So I made a video about repair days. I will link it above if you want to see what it's about. But this is an amazing event, and I like to donate a piece to their auction every year. And typically I donate a tiny tool. Okay, so my plan is... Alright, so I'm thinking about making a tiny one of these. I also have these guys. Oh dear, this is like a house of cards. Okay, so this is like what I want to make. Yeah, I'm gonna draw up some plans, like kind of to scale. And here I am drawing a to scale model, looking at the clamps that I had that I was basing my design off of. I ended up using 10 gauge sterling silver square wire and 16 gauge sterling silver round wire. Here is the actual drawing that I ended up with. This is a little bit of a preview of the finished design. I used a jeweler saw to cut the 10 gauge square wire. Now I'm just putting it in my miter jig and using a designated file to square up the ends so they're nice and flush and square. The threaded parts, I'm going to put a little end cap on, so here you can see me taking out all of my stock of sterling silver round tubing. I'm going to be setting stones in the ends of them just for decoration because it's part of my artistic style. So the tube is got to have to fit the 16 gauge sterling silver round wire. So here I have the size tube that I think is going to work, and I have the 16 gauge round wire. This is a little bit loose, so what I kind of want to do is draw it down. So I'm just going to cut a section of this and draw it down, and then I'll link up here to a video of me explaining how to draw down tubing to make it smaller. But we're not going to go over that right now. So here I am cutting a little tiny section of the tubing, and this is just a preview of what you would see in the tutorial to draw down the tubing. The drawing down of the outer diameter also affects the inner diameter to get smaller as well. So that's how I was able to get a tighter fit. There we go. You all might shake a little bit. Alright, so we've got our tubing drawn down, super exciting. I obviously drew down more than I thought that I would need. So now when I test my tube, look at that. Beautiful. I'm seeing that the thickness of this and the thickness of that are like about the same length. And I kind of like that, so I'm going to go with that. So these guys here are 3 millimeters, so I'm going to cut this to be 3 millimeters, which is going to be great because then I'll be able to, you know, tube set my stone in the end of it. You'll see where that comes at the end. I'm using dividers to measure my 3 millimeters and then use the dividers to mark the line. So now I'm putting the tube into my miter jig right up to the line that I scribed with my little dividers, and then I'm going to use my jeweler saw and just cut it out so it is the perfect size, and I'm just getting it nice and flat so everything is squared up. And then I put it in a pin vise just so I can hold it, and I'm taking the burr off of the edge of it. All right, and I'm just going to test it and see how nice it looks. That's what the end of the little threaded piece is going to look like. And I'll set a little brilliant cut faceted ruby in there. All right, so now I'm going to solder the end caps onto my wire. Got them on my fire brick, and I'm just going to put some handy flux on there, and I'm going to put my little solder pallions right on the solder seam. So I'm just heating up the whole area to evaporate the moisture out of the flux. And I'm doing it kind of slowly because I want my solder that I've placed little solder pallions on there, I want them to stay in place. And you can see if you do it too fast, it'll be fine. You'll just have to reposition your solder. Oh. My camera just died. I heard it turn off. Well, I guess I gotta go charge my batteries then. That went very well though. I'm gonna put these in the pickle. All right, so they're out of the pickle now, and I'm just cutting them roughly to length because I'm not gonna have like that whole length be the threaded part of the clamp. Here is a little set of taps, tiny taps and dies that I have. I'm using 16 gauge wire, which is right in the middle of the 0090 and 080. I decided to go with the larger threaded size of 080. Here is my bars. They're 30 millimeters long, and so then I have decided that from the end to this first element is going to be 3 millimeters. I'm going to drill a hole there, and then from that hole to the next hole is going to be 10 millimeters, 1 centimeter, and so from the end to the second holes is going to be 13 millimeters. I'm just finding the center of these flat faces, and then I mark off where the 3 millimeters would be, and then readjust the dividers to be 13 millimeters, and then I'm marking where that is too. So now that I have that laid out, I'm going to make little center punches on all the X's so that when I go to drill the holes, everything is nice and lined up. When we refer back to our little chart here, it shows that for a 080 tap, we're going to be recommended to use a number 55 drill bit. So here you can see I am using a 55 size drill bit to drill. All right. Ooh, guys, that is tight. If this was really like a clamp, I would be worried about the structural integrity of it. But it's not, so whatever. Now 2 of these holes are going to be tapped, and 2 of them, the little threaded pieces are going to go straight through. It looks like it fits through 54 really well, like really tightly, so I think that that's, I mean, it fits through 53, but it's kind of like loose in there, so I'm gonna just widen the holes, those 2 designated holes, to be 50, what did I say, 54, and then I can always, I can always make it bigger. So here I'm just changing out the drill bits to the slightly larger one, and then enlarging those 2 holes. I've got the clearance holes so that these bolts will fit, they fit in there. And there's not really a lot of play, which means it's not super important, but. So here you can see how the whole thing is kind of shaping up so far. Now I'm going to tap the smaller holes that will be threaded. So I clamp these little pieces in my bench vise. It does have kind of like serrated jaws, and so I just put a double layer of blue painter's tape because. So now this hole is tapped, and I'm just testing the threaded bolt to make sure that it fits in and that they're a good match for each other. All right, and then of course I have to do the second hole. Oh, you see I put the oil on there, so don't worry. Don't worry, I know to use oil, and I know to take my time, and there you can see the one hole is threaded and the other hole is just the clearance hole. Okay, so both of these holes are tapped. They look great. I'm kind of dry fitting the whole thing together. So the next thing that I really need to do, since I'm planning on making this into a pendant, is I need to make a way for a pendant to be able to go on a chain. So I've got this jump ring just like from my extra jump ring stash, and I'm going to close it with my parallel pliers. So now I'm just taking a fine tip Sharpie and marking where I'm going to cut it, and then I'll hold it in these. This is just my pair of chain nose pliers that are designated for cutting jump rings in half. And then I end up just squeezing it a little bit. And then you can see there, I'm going to solder it right onto that bar. So I end up holding the little half jump ring with the third hands and the cross-locking tweezers. I got a little flux on there and a little bit of hard solder. So here I am soldering. That acid bath called pickle it cleans off most of the oxidation that's caused by the heating process of soldering. All right, so I've got my threaded elements ready to go. I'm gonna set 2mm rubies. Tube outer diameter is 2.32. With 2mm stones, it might be cutting it a little close, but it's gonna be fine. So I've got my 2mm stones and I've got my 2mm setting burrs. If you want to see a video about tube setting faceted round stones, I will link a video in the description and also up there. And so if you want to know more about that process, check it out. But we're gonna keep going. I have this handy dandy pin vise, and so I'm going to put the whole threaded element into the pin vise so that when I'm setting the stone into this little tube end element on the threaded piece, that I have something to hold on to that's bigger than a 16 gauge piece of threaded wire. So I'm cutting the seat for the stone with the 2mm setting burr, and then I'm using a little brass pusher to make sure that the stone is in straight, and then I use a burnisher to go around the edges and just make sure that the edges of the tube that are left hold the stone into place. And then of course I'm making two, so I have to do the whole thing again. So here they are, looking like the sweet little tube set rubies that they are. I have to straighten out this little half jump ring, and so I just use some parallel pliers to make sure it's squared up. I'm going to have to now take these little square pieces and mark off that taper. Like these have a really severe taper. I think I'm going to do something a little bit more gradual. I mean, this is still pretty severe, but I have it in my head what I want to do, so I'll just draw it out and then you'll know what it is. So the ends weren't exactly the same length, and so I'm just dry fitting this together with the threaded elements, using some Sharpie marker as a quick layout fluid, and then Machinist square and scribe that'll help me kind of square up those ends to each other. And I'm just kind of measuring, eyeballing, looking at what I think I want dimensionally, like how I want that slope to go. And then I have some little chicken scratch marks that I'm connecting using this sweet little ruler to help me. So now you can kind of see the taper that I was intending to do for the jaws. I just hold the pieces with my parallel pliers and little finger and just, take it slow. Make sure it doesn't get sucked in. Make sure nothing flies into my face, and squaring it up on my little tiny disc sander. Okay, so here you can see them both. The rough form, I still have to kind of square it up with the hand file, but I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so I'm sanding all the sides and everything. I've got these like little sanding sticks that are super useful. So if I remember correctly, one taper came out really well and really square, and then the other one I had to go in with a file and square up using a kind of medium grit file. And then after I filed it, I go back and I sand it a little bit more. All the pieces are finished and the stone is set and looks like I'm ready to do the final assembly. So here are all my components. For the amount of time that it took to make this piece, it's amazing how little components they were. It all goes together pretty smoothly. I kind of had an idea of how I wanted the orientation of the jaws to be. And then I slip the chain through that little half jump ring on there. And then I put on this little hook, that's the clasp part, and then close that little loop with a pair of pliers. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. I wonder what I'm going to make next year for Repair Day's auction piece.